Welcome to B2B Revenue Leaders. I'm your host, Dustin. As always, B2B Revenue Leaders is brought to you by Testimonial Hero. Testimonial Hero helps you get more out of your best customer stories, whether they're recorded remote or on-site, and gives you customer video micro content to use throughout your entire buyer's journey. On this episode, I'm joined by Mike Fazio, who is the VP of Marketing and Revenue Operations at LSQ. We spoke a lot about Rev Ops, auditing and consolidating your tech stack going into 2023, where Rev Ops fits into an organization, and also some new tech that Mike's excited about. Hey, Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here, Dustin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about, all things Rev Ops today, but with particular focus on, where we are. So for context here, it's end of January 2023. We're all wondering, is this a recession? Is it not? Has it started yet? We're all looking at our budgets.
Yeah.
So I guess to dive right in on the Rev Ops side, I'm sure some marketers are looking at, is that an area to cut? Am I getting the most out of my technology? So what are you seeing there? Kind of what are your thoughts on that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the most important thing to look at your tech stack, right, just to start. Like if we're assuming, I'm assuming we're all sort of feeling some pressure from the board, from leadership saying, let's not spend money. Let's kind of slow things down. Let's make sure we're doing things correctly. I think something simple is just making sure you have an idea of what you're spending your money on first, right? Recently I moved into a new role at my company, and I realized we were spending a lot more money than I was expecting just on subscriptions and some things that were sort of partially being used. So before you can even look to figure out what do I want to spend, know what you're spending now, and if you still need it. So I think for me, that's a big thing. Also, just simple stuff like, do you have too many users and all that kind of just clean house a little bit.
I think that bloat of like when things were good, people add technology, we spend more on Google ads. I think there's a bit of that everywhere probably. And I think that's a good first step of, we're pretty lean on the tech stack side. So, there's not a whole lot we can trim. But we did do the audit on Google ads, like I said, and everything else of, is every dollar actually being effective, right? So
right.
I think once you have that cataloged, maybe you cut some stuff there. Any advice maybe on how to figure out what to cut? Like, is it spotting overlaps, or the obvious ones are it's not being used or one person's using it? But any advice on that?
Yeah. I'm sort of one to step back and think of, start from zero if I can, right? Mm-hmm. So without thinking, because I feel like that's where the bloat really sticks around, is when it's like, well, what's the justification for this tool? Well, we kind of use it for this, or we can kind of use it for that. But is that really core to what your team is doing, right? So, part of having a reduced budget or sort of just a more careful budget is you also might not be able to grow your team as much. So you don't have people who can actually utilize the tools. So if we sort of step back and say, for, this year, what am I actually trying to do? And from a marketing standpoint, I think, as marketing leaders, we need to continue to focus on being revenue generating and focus on revenue, right? I think, Latney from Sixth Sense says a lot of like, she's a steward of the pipeline, like that type of thing. So for me, it's focusing hard on how do we weather this potential recession, and the best way to do that is to drive as much revenue as possible. So that's where I want to start, is not should I keep this? It's sort of, is this tool providing value towards this revenue goal, and do we have people who are going to maximize that?
For sure, yeah. And I think, this might bleed into another area I think we should talk about, but I've also found sometimes marketing doesn't know the tech sales uses, and sales doesn't know what CS uses, and they have different tech that does essentially the same thing. And I think that's probably where Rev Ops comes in, whether it lives under marketing, its own department if you're larger, but looking at that overarching picture of where can we consolidate is probably something some companies are missing right now.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. We had a couple different e-signature tools that we were using, and it was like, why? It also helped that one was clearly better than the other, but it was like, okay, we have two of those, we have, a couple of these other things. And yeah, you're right. That's those simple things can save a lot.
Yeah. And then on the Rev Ops side, it's, I think, a new-ish term? Like it always just used to be marketing ops, sales ops, everything was divided, but now it's Rev Ops. Where, like, I guess, how are you guys structured as well? And how do you personally think about Rev Ops, where it should live, how it's connected to the different teams?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I might be biased because I come from more on the marketing ops side and being in roles where I was just lucky to also have, sales operations pieces
Hmm.
in front of me. So I think that it's sort of, I feel like the market is sort of pushing it more towards being just a sales ops kind of role. You look at a lot of the guys and ladies who are starting these Rev Ops companies, consulting companies, they end up talking mostly about forecasting and
Hmm.
pipeline reporting and that kind of stuff, which is all important and is all part of it. But I think if we focus too much on that, then it's just sales ops, right? I think the power of revenue operations is, and maybe why it should even live under marketing is because marketing has a wider purview, right? Marketing is inside of product, and marketing deals with sales all the time, and marketing does obviously the market and the brand, right? So because marketing already sort of naturally has this wider view, RevOps needs that as well, right? And to your point, like how are you, who else is going to put together that, product is using this tool and sales is using this other tool that's the same thing, and also marketing has their own thing. They
Yeah.
all do the same, it's all the same tool that's doing the same thing. Um, so it's sort of just a way to break down some of those barriers, and I feel like that's where it needs to be. In a bigger company, I could see it trying to live, maybe on its own. I don't know that you can necessarily have a chief revenue operations officer at this point, or that you need it,
Hmm.
but at least like a VP level to just kind of say, all right, enough's enough. Let's keep our stuff together, get some more efficiency out of operations. Um,
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also like a growing pains thing where someone, depending on the need of the company at the time, either starts with a marketing ops or a sales ops person out of
Hmm.
necessity because
Yeah.
there's probably unicorns out there who can do it all and tie all the systems together, but good luck finding
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah.
And then it's, working backwards from there and filling in the skill set and all that. And one of the points you made there that I like is marketing's purview is large, from brand awareness to retaining and renewing customers. They're involved in, or they should be at least, involved in some capacity throughout as
Yeah.
well, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
do you see any, I kind of hate to use the words trends, but we're looking at 2023 here, and I think marketing's focus has shifted probably more to customers and returning and, getting your net retention above 100. So if new sales fall off, it's not as much of a panic. How do you feel that RevOps as a whole can kind of do a better job helping with that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I feel like they certainly should if they're not. I think a big part is maybe just thinking about customer retention um, and customer advocacy, sort of, making sure that we're turning customers into brand advocates as well, the same way that you would a pipeline, right? Like
Hmm.
first measure it and make sure you have a good idea of what is your leaky bucket, right? How many holes do you have and how quickly is stuff leaving, right? Because I feel like once you measure it and you really get a handle on, oh my gosh, this is happening,
Hmm.
I feel like that is going to be big. I think also just understanding the lifetime value of the customers, because again, that's going to be part of your calculation, right? I know I'm spending this much to get a customer in, it's going to give me this much value, but then how much if I extend that another year or two, right? And then as far as actually going through and helping retain customers, I think we could start using automation better. One thing I'm looking at right now is I'm working with the engineering team to make sure that they're sending us uh, like summary transaction data, right? So I know that these customers have turned on this thing and they're using the product and everything's great. Wait, they've turned this thing off or they haven't used the product in a certain amount of time. Let me know that so we can have somebody
Hmm.
reach out, right? So as long as it goes into my Salesforce, I can, blast out a message to either directly to the person or alert the CSM or do something like that, right? Um, so I think those types of things are really just sort of easy off the, things that we already do, right? We should already have automation and kind of handle that data. It's just sort of pulling in and making the campaigns and automations focused on customers.
Yeah, I like I guess the contextual piece there of what has this customer actually done, where are they potentially missing value? Because all too often,
Mhm.
I've been guilty of this. I think all companies have, and you've experienced probably as a buyer where the CSM says, "Hey, let's hop on a call this quarter to discuss things," without a reason. And it's really hard to get on a call, right? I turn down those calls sometimes because there's just a lot going on. But if it was contextual, that I saw where you were using this part, but you're not currently using this feature, can I show you how you might get more out of it? I would hop on that call. That's potential solid upsell. But I have found setting up that wiring is not easy, right? Like all the back end, getting the customer data, the sales data, the marketing data. So how do you tackle that, I guess, and getting it all actually wired and working together?
I'll let you know when it's all finished. But really, I think it comes down to again sort of the role that Rev Ops is in, where knowing that we naturally have to work across the company. One of those things we need to work with is engineering, right? Because they have the resources that can help us figure out, is this ABC account the same as this ABC account and the same as this ABC account? Okay, great. That's what we need, so we can finally go out and go to this one person, right? So that's maybe a cop-out answer to say hang on the engineers, but if you can dig in and because what I found is the engineering team typically wants to help the company as much as possible. Like the CTO isn't sitting there, hoping to do nothing, right? He or she wants to make sure that they're impacting revenue also, and one of those ways is making sure that your go-to-market team has the data that they need to automate things and to make smart touches on the customer.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like I love Zapier, Tray.io. There's only so much you can, I use them daily, right? But there's only so much I can do. And I will lean on someone who actually knows, even a simple Python code that can make my life easier and get things syncing, right? Where for me, it would take God knows how long, weeks to get that done. So I think that's good advice there for sure. And then, looking forward into this year coming up, we both mentioned budget. I think pretty much every marketer is at least looking and considering scenarios. What else are you, what's kind of top of mind right now aside from that in 2023?
Aside from budget?
Yeah.
I think, I think for me, it's looking at some of the fundamentals. I mean, I'm sort of in building mode for my team, which has sort of put me back into an interesting place where we're trying to carve out, what does marketing look like for my company, right? We all kind of have our, have the high level. We know the different spots, different parts, but really bringing that into context of your company is sort of an interesting question. So what that means for me right now is a big focus on being specific with the campaigns that we're going to run this quarter, right? Being very focused on outcomes and measurable results from those campaigns. One of the things that I am, I think, frustrated by, which probably most of us marketers are and have been for a long time, is just how easy it is to say that a lot of marketing is hard to measure. And it is. Like, how do you measure brand and whatever? And I'm sure with enough money you can get some sort of measurements. But what I want to make sure is that we say, okay, we're running these 5 campaigns. Here's what we expect to happen, but here's at least how we're going to measure it. And even if right now we need to measure it with an Excel spreadsheet, talk to me 5 years ago and I would have called you crazy, right? Like, why would you use an Excel spreadsheet? But sometimes it's not worth spending the money on a tool to get you those numbers and to do all that work to get the numbers in a fancy report, when right now we just need to see if this campaign works and to know if we even care about the numbers that come from it. So for me right now, it's focusing hard on some very, the most impactful campaigns that we can, making sure we can measure those and kind of just see what comes from it.
Yeah, it's the measurement thing's interesting, right? Because I find where, I get blocked is where everything has to get tied dollar for dollar to revenue. Just because it's impossible, right? I would love that. But for me, it's finding, especially for, more brand demand gen type stuff, finding what the proxy is. So say it's LinkedIn ads, measuring conversions there for cold audience can be a little hard. So what do you actually look at? Is it, actual traffic, branded searches increasing, just finding some metric that you can tie to it and measuring it. And I agree. I actually like Google Sheets and Excel. So
Yeah.
5 years ago, maybe you wouldn't get a log about that, but we do use it a little bit for stuff like that, where, we go
Yeah.
through our ABM list and are just ticking it off rather than paying $3,000 a month for technology to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been playing recently with Google Data Studio. I think they're
Okay.
calling it Looker Studio now or something. And it's
Yeah.
free and it's awesome because you have a spreadsheet and you can go and build a bunch of visualizations really quick on it. Um, it doesn't take a data scientist and it's free. I think I mentioned it was free a couple times.
Yeah.
Um,
That's important nowadays. So, yeah.
it is. But it's a way that, visualizing data, I think, is really important as well. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's a fun one.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. I didn't know it was free, so I'm going to go check that out. I
Yeah.
looked at, purchasing Looker a few years ago, kind of during the like big data, they were all getting a bunch of money and getting acquired stage. So good to know
Mhm.
that it's kind of resurfacing on that side.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good one. Yeah, check it out. Google Data Studio or Looker Studio, something like that.
Nice. Very cool. And then I guess, kind of last one, and I think we talked about this a little bit or around it, like you mentioned, Google Data Studio is just your marketing tech stack or Rev Ops stack, whatever we want to
Mm.
call it.
Yeah.
Is there a particular, either tool you just adopted or you're looking at that, or even an area that you're excited about?
Yeah. I geek out about tools a lot. I'm a very tech and operations first sort of CMO or head of marketing. But right now we're digging into Sixth Sense. We just set it up a few months ago, and we're still trying to figure out like what does it look like to rely more heavily on that data and see where that takes us. So I'm curious to see where that kind of comes this next year, because I think there's got to be something in there with their data models and trying to find lookalike companies and whatnot. Um, I'm really interested, and this is not something I'll be able to play with necessarily this year. Um, More modeling on marketing metrics, looking at like data models more than just sort of what are the actual like clicks and
Hmm.
attribution models and stuff. Like dig a little more in there. There's a lot. I feel like there's some momentum on the data science side of like deeper marketing models. So I'd be curious to see if those are becoming more accessible to us. It might help answer some of those questions. Um, but yeah, for as far as actually like tools I'm going to use, Sixth Sense is a big one. Continuing to make sure, we use Outreach.io for our SDRs and stuff, and that's a really
Hmm.
interesting tool as well. Um, and then I'm really curious to see what I'm able to do once I get some more customer data into Salesforce and maybe automate some messages and sit in Pardot that I can go out and maybe some sequences and stuff in Outreach. So yeah, should be an
Nice.
interesting year.
Yeah, lots going on there. I think the data model side is interesting too, because it used to be, to actually get relevant results, you kind of need to be the Amazons and Googles and, the
Hmm.
ridiculous traffic purchase companies.
Yeah.
But that, and even the different MarTech, like metadata example, it seems to be becoming more accessible for smaller companies. Like it all seems to be trending that way, which I'm excited about because there's stuff I want to try, but I know I can't afford it right now and
Exactly.
it won't work with our data, right? But
Yeah.
that's exciting. Cool.
Yeah.
And then, we've talked a lot about 2023. I know you repost on LinkedIn and all that. If people do want to connect, learn more about you, connect, where should they go do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I should know my LinkedIn. It's whatever the LinkedIn thing, Mike A. Fazio, because there's lots of Mike Fazios out there. So it's Mike A. Fazio. I'm at LSQ, so you'll see that's there. I think I have a mention of mad scientist in my line.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, ping me there. Pretty much all the socials that you'll find me on. Um, yeah,
Awesome.
so
All
feel
right.
free to connect.
Yeah. So we'll include the link there. And Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks again for listening to this episode. My big takeaway here is on the consolidation and utilization side of your tech stack. So, as a marketer, you've probably been asked to forecast different scenarios, find ways to cut costs, be more efficient. And one place to potentially start is with your tech stack and just figuring out what you're paying for, who has access, what the redundancies are, and saving some budget there rather than cutting from channels that are actually driving demand and new business or retention. So that's my key takeaway. Thanks again for listening. As always, we will be back every single Tuesday with a new episode.